everyone. Welcome to the YU Alumni in Israel event. Thank you all for joining. This event will be a very informational event. I appreciate the 4 panelists for coming on to talk about their experiences working in Israel, how they got to where they are. And without further ado, I would like for each panelist to go and introduce themselves, tell everyone where you work, what you do, and just all about your experiences working in Israel. Adir, let's start with you. You're muted, Adir.
Sorry, guys. So my name is Adir Alon, class of 2017. I grew up in Israel, and I got back to Israel basically the day after the graduation ceremony. That was always my dream, to go back and be close to my family after graduation. So right now I'm the head of global public relations in DM Communications, which is a leading PR company. We represent fintech companies, finance, tech companies, startups, corporations. Basically, my daily job, I'm in constant contact with my clients. I also have a vast experience in reaching out to reporters globally. I usually work with global media. That's pretty much it.
All right, awesome. Mike, do you want to share about what you do?
Yeah, I am Cy Sims, class of 2007. I majored in finance and accounting, and I moved to Israel, 3 years ago now, almost. And I work for Eisner Amper, a New York/US based accounting firm. We have offices in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem here, and I do work out of both and my home. And I do US taxes pretty much exclusively for US based companies. I work in real estate. Pretty much everyone else works in financial services, hedge funds, private equity, and all that. But and we just opened an audit department here for Eisner in Israel, so we're growing big time. But that's the path I took to get here.
Very nice. Talya, you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So my name is Talya. I graduated actually this past year and made Aliyah this past September. Would have been about a month earlier, but with COVID, paperwork was running a lot slower. I work in Tel Aviv at a cybersecurity company. I majored in psych and business. It was a business management. A little bit of a stretch. I ended up in the tech world here with my business, really, and I'm doing business development. My company specializes in ad security, meaning that we essentially it's security for any programmatic or direct ads being served on any site. So any site that you go on that you see ads, my company actually filters out those ads, making sure that no inappropriate or really whatever that company chooses to not have on their site is off their site, and that's what we do.
Thank you. And Leora, tell us about yourself.
So I'm Leora Betesh. I graduated in 2001 with a degree in computer science from Stern College. I've been in Israel since beginning of 2007, and I worked for many years as a database developer, first in UBS in Weehawken, New Jersey for 5 years, and then in Israel for 10 years at a small company called Sweet Solutions. And now I'm working as a computer vision algorithm developer in RTC Vision. Actually, a few years ago, I made a change. I already had a background in computer science, but I did a boot camp in machine learning to get some more interesting and exciting work experience. And that's it. I live in the Modi'in area, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And Naomi, I appreciate you coming on to be our moderator for this event. Much appreciated, and looking forward to hearing all the questions and the answers.
Sorry about that. I forgot to unmute myself. So yes, I just first of all want to thank everyone, all the students for coming. But most importantly, I want to thank Benji Arye, who is our employer relations student employee, for organizing this panel. As he mentioned earlier, he has a hidden agenda, I think. I think that's okay, but it's a hidden agenda that he shared with everyone. He himself is very interested in making Aliyah fairly shortly, within, I think he said 1 to 2 years. So, you know, we always welcome students' input in terms of programmatic issues and what kinds of programs students want to see. So if any of you today, you know, have any ideas, please feel free to contact the Shevet Glaubach Center, and we are happy to entertain ideas. So again, first of all, thank you, Benji, for organizing this. And again, thank you to the employer relations team headed by Talya Saban and Barbara, and then supported by Barbara Lerman and Matthew Garcia, because together as a group, they really helped put together this panel. And obviously, most importantly, thank the panelists for coming and sharing, hopefully, really useful information. And so we want to make this formal, but also we really appreciate the speakers' personal experiences, because I think that makes it more real for students when they themselves have to think about how are they going to implement what the speakers have shared today. So the first question, actually, everybody has answered, so I appreciate that. I wondered, though, if you could, I think people said it, but I'm just going to ask them to repeat it. If you could just share with us, maybe we could start with Mike and then Adir. I'm just doing it according to what I see on my screen. Mike, maybe Adir, Leora, and then Talya. Could you just give us a sense of what a typical day looks like for you, a typical work day looks like for you? So maybe start with Mike.
Okay, so as I said, for the most part, Eisner for Israel, we work on, I should correct myself and say we work on U.S. taxes, also for people in Israel, but for the most part, our colleagues are in the United States. So we start a little bit later than a normal day. We're not working U.S. hours, but we're working like a mix, like we overlap. So I would say a 10 to 6, 10 to 7, as opposed to a 9 to 5 or an 8 to 5, whatever it is. And we're working, and during busy season, I'm not going to pretend it's not longer, because it is longer. But we try to overlap with the U.S., but we do most of our work during Israel times. We're Israel employees, we're Israel everything. So we get to the office anywhere between 9:30 and 10 o'clock. Some people 10:30, some people 11. And I mean, we do our work, communicate with the United States when they wake up, 7:30, 8 o'clock, 8:39. And then we can push all the work forward. And I'm doing U.S. tax, so compliance and consulting, doing actual tax returns, and telling people, advising them on the strategies for tax. And that's kind of what my day looks like, no different than it did in the U.S., except maybe starting a little later and ending a little later, but having dinner with my family at a normal hour, pretty normal things that I didn't actually have in the U.S. So that's kind of nice. And I prior to this job, I did have a job where I worked U.S. hours, and that is another option for people, but we don't really do that here.
Okay, great. Adir, thank you. Adir?
Sure. I can really relate to Mike because I also work with U.S. journalists and also European journalists. So I also work in Israeli business hours. So we try to, basically I'm waiting for everyone in the US to wake up, and there's emails waiting for them in their inbox. But also I've been working from home actually a year before COVID, because me and my boss are really believing and like external force, we have people in the UK, in the US, all over the place. So right now we've been working from home and we really liked it. So when COVID came, it was really natural for us to keep on the good work. And that's pretty much it. We're working from 9 to 6. And since I'm working from home, I have a very good, there's a sort of a suggestion for everyone who's participating in this discussion. You should really limit yourself into working hours, because once you're home, there's no one to tell you to go home or anything. You just like keep working and working and working. So it's really important to limit yourself to the working hours. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Adir. And Leora?
So my day looks a little different. A lot of us come in quite early. I'm a lot of times in the office 7:30, take on the early shift. And by 8 o'clock, there's a nice amount of people there sitting together, drinking coffee. The Israeli workplace, especially in a smaller office, it's very family oriented. It's very intimate. It would be really rude to go and sit at your desk and not have a coffee with everyone in the morning. It's kind of like eating breakfast with your family. So that's how we start the day. And then the office I'm working at is actually kind of chill. Everyone's just interested in their work, so we want to do it, but it's not like very pressured with deadlines. It's a nice environment, and we don't really do very much that's customer facing. We're working in small teams and on our own. And everyone kind of makes their own schedule. My day ends, maybe in the 4s and the 5s. And that's it.
Okay. And Leora, can you just tell us a little bit about what you do as an algorithm engineer, though? As someone who is not tech oriented, I actually found your title interesting, and maybe you could just share with other students, with the students here, what that really means.
Sure. I could tell you about the project I'm working on now. I'm working on a robot that assists with spinal surgery. It's called Mazor Spine Assist. And we help the robot, we scan, there's CTs that are taken of the patients that are getting operated on. So there are CTs taken before the surgery that are used for planning the surgery. And then there are x-rays taken in the operating room. So we kind of do like the vision of the robot. We figure out where the vertebrae are, where the doctor should make the incision, getting all that information. So computer vision is usually having some sort of image. In our case, it's an x-ray, and having to interpret it the same way a human would read it and understand where things are. So instead of the doctor having to read it, the computer program reads it. So algorithm development is just writing the program to tell the program to do what the human would do.
Great. Thank you, Leora.
Sure.
And last but not least is Talya. Talya, can you share a little bit with us what your typical day looks like?
Of course, it is a lot less cool than having a robot who does surgery. So my company is actually also internationally based. I work with our New York team. My office is actually in Tel Aviv, but when I was job searching originally, it was very important to me that I was working with a company in America, because I didn't feel that the transition would be so easy with me working with people in New York and then transitioning to working with Israelis. So I work with our New York team. So the first half of my day is really just really just personal stuff I need to take care of. And my day starts around 3:30. So my boss actually is a firm believer in performance-based work. So it's not necessarily that I have to get X, Y, and Z done at the end of the day. It's more making sure that everything that I have to accomplish by the end of the week, and I'm continuously producing those results. So specifically, I work on the customer-facing team. So I'm dealing with potential clients the majority of the day. So I'm speaking on the phone, or I'm on Zoom calls for about a good 4 to 5 hours. And then if I'm not doing that, in my role specifically, I'm actually sourcing out potential leads for my company, researching accounts, and really providing that information and filtering all of that into the system that we use to track all the client relations that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. So that's really essentially what my day looks like.
Sorry, did you say when you get in and when you leave? Just give people.
Oh, yeah.
Like this.
Sorry about that.
No,
So I
that's
actually get in around at 3:30. I've been working from home mostly, and it's just been easier with COVID. They really transitioned to everyone working from home. So I can work remote. I do go in on Sundays, and it's very similar to Leora's office environment. Very different from the typical American office. You get in, you start your day at around 10, 11. People really sit down, have a cup of coffee for about an hour and a half. You leave the office about 6 or 7 times for a smoke or coffee break. It's a really big transition if you've worked in a high tense American office, but it is a really nice office environment. And I leave around like 8:30, 9 o'clock.
Great, great. Okay, so the second question is just to give students a realistic perspective. Can you tell us how long ago? I know some of you actually said this, but just to repeat it, because I'm going to ask you a little bit about a follow-up to that. How long ago you made Aliyah? Did you have a job before you moved and made Aliyah? And how did you secure your first position in Israel? So again, if we want to, Talya, why don't we start with you first?
So I made Aliyah this past September. I actually had a job lined up that I had applied for around July, and I had secured it by August. My Aliyah was actually pushed off by a couple of weeks just because of paperwork. So the offer was actually rescinded, which in retrospect really was the best thing that could have happened because my job search started again. And just with the complications and the stress of really making Aliyah, I think it was nice that I had about a nice month to really really start again with the job search. So it was a nice break, and honestly, it was very helpful to me. I think if you come in with realistic expectations, I spent a lot of time. Actually, thanks to the Career Center, I had a really excellent network of people from the YU Tech trip, and it was really great, very helpful. And I actually spoke with a lot of the people in YU alumni who lived in Israel, and I had my resume redone about 6 or 7 times. And I think it was honestly very overwhelming, but I think it was also very helpful that I just continuously applied to more and more jobs. I was able to secure a job within 3 weeks. And that was really with every single day being on the job search, looking and really zoning in on exactly what industry I wanted to work in. What are my skills? How can I translate that? My Hebrew wasn't great making Aliyah, so I had to really, I had to really sell myself for my English, and working with a US-based team, which was a priority for me. I think it's very possible to do it in a short amount of time. I happen to do it when there's an excess of jobs, and thank God in Israel, I think that there always is a tremendous amount of jobs. It's just a matter of how to make yourself appealing to that specific job.
Great. Leora?
So I have to say, Talya, I'm so impressed with what you did. That just sounds amazing. You're right that there is an excess of jobs. There's so many opportunities, but that you got one so quickly, that's awesome. As for my own story, so I also went the typical routes. I found a job very easily when we made Aliyah, when I was ready. We had a friend that had found a job, a Nefesh B'Nefesh, and somebody had advertised a Nefesh B'Nefesh. He started working there, submitted my resume. They hired me on the spot. Basically, out of the first 5 developers in the company, 4 were YU graduates with the same, computer science degree. So it was basically, they looked at my resume and I was hired instantly. That was my first job, also like soft landing with Anglos. And later on, the transition to a different job was different, but I went that route. Sorry, Naomi, did you say something? I didn't hear.
No, Adir, can you unmute?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So yeah, as I said earlier, basically the day after my graduation, I flew back to Israel along with my parents. Everybody was making fun of me that like every spring break or summer break, I went back to Israel because I'm really close to my family, so it was clear to everyone. So as soon as I get my degree, I'll go back to Israel. So yeah, I had an internship, a 6 months internship in the Israeli consulate in New York at the public diplomacy department. Basically I finished there like the day before the graduation ceremony. And when I got back to Israel, I got a job offer from the Israeli consulate in San Francisco. So that was a huge, I was really, I really didn't know what to do because I just got back to Israel and waiting to start my life here. Now to go back to San Francisco. And so I was really close to getting this job, and eventually I gave up on it and started to applying communication companies here in Israel, PR companies. Actually, I mean, as opposed to Talya, I had a really hard time to find the right job. Basically, it took me like 3 months, I believe. And that was surprising because I thought, since I'm an Israeli who studied in American university, people are going to fight over my services. And that wasn't the case. People were really impressed about my resume because I also had an internship at the Knesset. But they wanted experience. So my suggestion to all the participants here is to gain as much experience as you can before starting the real life after college, because that was my main obstacle to go in finding a job. But eventually, so I found one in a good company. It was a small company when I just started there 3.5 years ago, but now it's getting bigger and bigger. And actually, it all happened. We had like an Israeli angle. We worked with only Israeli journalists before I got to this company. And my boss wanted to take advantage of my English skills and start working with Israeli companies who wants to be communicated also in the US and Europe. So we started like a whole different angle. And right now, this is the focus of our office. Any other question you had, Naomi, that I missed?
No, that was great. And we're just going to get now to Mike, if he could share with us a little bit about his, again, how long ago he made Aliyah, and if he had a job before he made Aliyah, and how you secured your first position.
Okay, so I took a different route. I graduated in 2007 and didn't make Aliyah until 2018. Went to law school in between then and there, and I had a job in the U.S. And when I went to visit Israel, I got offered a job. I was a tax attorney. I got offered a job doing U.S. tax compliance at this small shop in Tel Aviv, and I like really thought about it, but I did not bite the bullet. And then when I went back later in that summer, I met with a whole bunch of attorneys and a bunch of CPAs. And then I talked to another one, and she gave my number to a whole bunch of other CPAs at KPMG, at Deloitte, PwC. And then I flew back one more time, interviewed with all of them, and had 2 offers, picked one, and they made me an offer in January of 2018, and we moved in July. I had 4 kids. I have 4 kids, and I was not going to move without some sort of job, even if it wasn't the greatest one. So that's my route. I spoke to people, and other people spoke to me, and put in a good word with other people, and it was quick networking, but it worked for me.
Great. So I guess what I just want to summarize is I hear that everybody had a different experience. And as Adir said, it's kind of funny. The person who is Israeli had perhaps the most difficulty getting his first position. So as
Absolutely.
I guess the adage is, you never know in Israel, right? Things that are not necessarily logical in their progression. But thank you for sharing that. I'll just ask you, although we're focusing primarily on the work experience in Israel, what was your, just very briefly, what was your Aliyah process like for you? What were the surprises you did not expect, both positive and challenging ones? And then again, we'll, maybe I'll just start with Leora.
Okay. Overall, we thought we had landed in Gan Eden. We came in the winter from New York, so it was a pretty positive experience. I think that what surprised us the most was my husband and I both came with very good Hebrew, and it didn't prepare us for the cultural differences. I think it took quite a number of years to get the culture, to get the jokes, to you know, to bridge the social gap with native Israelis and not just feel comfortable with the Anglos. But overall, we had a very positive experience. We came in our mid-20s, so we were young enough to, we had a high tolerance for the uncertainty, and it worked well for us.
Okay, thanks. Talya?
So my Aliyah was quite challenging. I had actually gotten married in August, and my husband already lived in Israel. So dealing with the paperwork and dealing with getting the right stamps, getting all the signatures approved beforehand. My passport, actually, I was also originally Israeli, so my passport also had expired. They really just threw everything that could have happened, they really threw it at me within that month. And within that really small time frame, there was if I didn't make Aliyah before a certain date, I would have had to pay another fee. So really getting there was very difficult. I have to say also, just culturally, I agree with Leora. Like it's really challenging. I think also coming in that after I had landed a job, I had gone to the office feeling so confident, and then having every one of my coworkers at least be 10 years plus older than me. Don't get me wrong, it's quite flattering when people think that graduating at 22, graduating college at 22 is really impressive. But when everyone else is older than you, it creates this massive gap also for making friends, trying to get along with your coworkers. Eating lunch at your desk by yourself is definitely culturally not what people do here. But also the Hebrew, when technically everyone in my company is supposed to speak English. Everyone does have to take an English class. I was actually the first person in 10 years who they had to make a separate Hebrew class for. So that was also very exciting for me. But really, there was a lot of things I had to get used to. It's still every single day is still more or less a challenge, but it's also been exciting to overcome certain things, to get used to the office environment, to get used to my coworkers, having kids, and me just graduating college about a year ago. So it's, I think culturally, it's a challenge as an international student moving to New York. It's the same thing. It's difficult. I moved from Toronto, so New York wasn't such a big change, but I think it just takes time, and really just to give yourself a break every now and then and remind yourself that it's a big move. You're going to have a lot of things thrown at you, and just to take it one day at a time and make sure you have that really secure support system.
Thank you. And Mike, do you want to chime in?
So this is going to sound weird because I made Aliyah at an older age, but our biggest challenges were with the kids. I don't, on a daily basis, I don't really speak Hebrew. It's because my job is 100% in English, and I live in a pretty Anglo area. I mean, my parents were Israeli, and I had Israeli citizenship also. And my Hebrew is not as good as it used to be. And getting used to, the aspects of customer service here, and trying to find people to fix things in your house, that it's just very different. Banking is very different. Those things, getting used to them are challenging. But as I said, I don't remember life being simple in America. So you just have different challenges. I don't think that more challenging, but we really thank God, had a very, very easy landing. We moved near my brother, so that kind of helped things, and we live in a great community of a lot of Olim, so that kind of helped as well. So, I mean, surprising are the customer service and the banking, but on the positive side, we moved into a tremendous community.
Great. And Adir, I know that you are Israeli, so I don't know if you actually, faced anything different than the other speakers, but was there anything, again, you said you went home often, so you were obviously very clear, so you didn't have an Aliyah transition, but were there any other things, kind of having received your education in the United States, that kind of surprised you in working full-time in Israel?
Yeah, first of all, let's start with the positive things. Obviously, it was to live close to my family and meet an Israeli woman. I mean, I graduated while I was 27 because I was in the IDF, so I joined pretty late. So actually, I met my wife a week after I got to Israel. We got married in July 2019. So definitely that was the positive side. And the negative, it's probably like a challenge to every graduating student, to start your life finally without any frame. First it's school, and then for me it was the IDF, and then university, and at the age of 27 I need to start like a real job and get an apartment, pay rent. So I think that was the main challenge for me when I got to Israel. But everything else, I mean, basically I'm Israeli, so I was used to Israeli mentality and Israeli culture. So on this side, it was very natural for me.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much.
Sure.
So the next question we had is actually, I think people addressed it. It was going to be more about the work culture in Israel, but I think many of you have addressed it, and you kind of gave your own examples of how you adapted. I guess one thing I just want to ask, maybe I'll just ask Mike this, because he has had, Mike and maybe Leora, because you've had previous experience working in the United States more significantly, let's say, than the other two. So what was like the biggest difference in terms of working in Israel versus working in the United States? And then for everybody, maybe everybody can kind of chime in there, is we hear from Nefesh B'Nefesh all the time how critical Hebrew is for career success in many different sectors, in many different industries. Have you found that to be true in your particular industry? So maybe just the first one, as I mentioned earlier, maybe we'll ask Mike and Leora just to address, since they have had significant professional experience working in the United States before they went to Israel. Maybe you could address the first, how was it different than working in the United States? So it's up to you, who wants to start first. Maybe I can, Mike, I'll ask you to start first, if that's okay.
I was going to say ladies first, but that's
okay. Very
fine.
sweet.
So I've had, a lot of experience. I worked at KPMG in New York, and then I worked in Detroit at 2 separate law firms. And the culture is, and I had a great culture at my law firms. I really loved it. But the culture here is just different. There's just this, like, I think Talya and Leora both talked about having coffee, and the friendliness in the break room. Talya did mention the cigarette breaks, which I found hilarious because it's really prevalent. Not as much in Eisner where I am now, but I'm actually dressed up right now because I have a dinner meeting with a referral client. So this is dressed up. I work into the office. It's just, there's just a more relaxed, centric around the Jewish holidays, and which makes everything a little bit more comfortable. You know,
Okay. And Leora?
Yes. So my
my law firm.
Oh, sorry.
There were 120 lawyers and 75.
Okay. So my experience in America was all in New York. So not all of America is the same. I was, in probably the work environment that you're all familiar with, and I found it there. It was really important to be professional. You had to come in every day dressed a certain way. It wasn't only about the work you did; it was about how you did it and how who you interacted with. I find that here in Israel, there's a lot less of that. It's really about what you do and what you know. It doesn't matter how you dress. Like, to echo what Mike said, I think that people here really appreciate authenticity. Just be yourself. Just, don't be embarrassed of who you are. Just there's a lot less privacy, I would say. I think in America, people are tend to be careful about invading other people's space, and here it's the opposite. It's a little bit insulting to be to be private and keep to yourself. Yeah, I think the whole thing with the management style is different. There are just a lot of differences, but overall, I've come to enjoy them.
Okay. And about Hebrew. Now, I know, Mike, that you are working in an English-speaking environment. So, as you said, your Hebrew actually has worsened being in the current position that you're in. I wondered, though, if the other speakers panelists could just speak a little bit about how critical have you found Hebrew to be in terms of getting a position and in your particular industry. So maybe Talya, can we start with you?
Sure. So my Hebrew level, just right off the bat, not strong at all. I have 2 Hebrew speaking parents, so I think I have a good understanding, but I think I'm at a very low level speaking. I did write on my resume, and I think it was fine. I wrote Hebrew, like very basic level, which definitely came up in interviews. I did apply to companies specifically that had US based teams because that's where I intended on working. And I think within the entire tech industry in Israel, you have to speak Hebrew. You have to speak English. If you are working in if you're working on a customer facing team, you have to have like at least a decent level of English. Everyone in my company has to take at least 3 English lessons a week, and they're learning about high school level English, I believe. But it is preferred that you speak English in the workplace, at least in my company. I know that they put an extreme emphasis on everyone improving. And I believe it came up recently in the past year because they had realized that I want to say email etiquette in Israel is not the same as the email etiquette in America. So there had been a lot of issues. So they had also been working on writing. I don't think you need to speak Hebrew fluently to get a job here. I very firmly believe that. I think for feeling more confident in the office and feeling as though you can communicate with people effectively and get across what you're trying to say in a meeting, I think it's very important then to work on your Hebrew. I know that I felt the most uncomfortable and the most insecure in company-wide meetings or team meetings where people would be speaking English relatively well and then automatically switch to Hebrew just because it was a fast dialogue and Hebrew is their first language. And there is a discomfort to that. I would say that it is important that you should be working on that before you make Aliyah. It will help the transition. It will make you feel more comfortable in any environment you're in Israel. But professionally, I think it's important to really have come in with strong English skills. That's a huge selling point. Not just being able to verbally speak English, but to also have high level writing. I think that's a huge selling point on a resume.
Great. And Adir, I know that you are fluent in both, so I guess the Hebrew issue wasn't an issue for you. However, in the PR industry in Israel, can you kind of address a little bit about the importance of Hebrew?
Yeah, well, first of all, yes, Hebrew is important, but at least in marketing, technology, communication,